And then she spread her wings right over me. She said she's gonna...
Hey, welcome to a new episode of the mini-series of Effects Explained. Today we're going to be checking out Reverb. This is a mini-series where you in the comments can let me know what kind of effects you want me to explain. We're going to go from beginner's mode to expert mode and reaching some levels that aren't usually seen on YouTube. So today we're going to be checking out Reverb. Hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to be testing it out with guitars, with synths, with drums, and explaining all the basic parameters and digging really deep. If you like this kind of videos, don't forget to drop a comment. It's very important so we know what you like to see. Let me know also what other effects you want me to check out in future videos, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's start with the video. So last video we checked out delays, and today we're checking out reverbs. I chose the Auto Reverb by Gamechanger Audio, and I chose it because it was a very good option to explain reverbs, since it can go from very basic parameters such as holes, plates and spring, and that we're going to be explaining all of that in 1 second. And also with this pedal you can automate different parameters and send things to different parts of the pedal, and also you can automate this pedal using like modular synths that we're going to show today. So that's why I chose this great pedal. And just as a hint, for the next episode I'm going to be showing the Octave Reverb by JHS, that me as a producer and a mix engineer, I love using octave reverbs such as shimmers and stuff. So I'm going to be showing you how to create them inside the software and how to create them with this pedal in the next episode. Back to the reverb, let's go to the basics. So a reverb basically is the sound that is generated in a room or a space. Whenever we have our dry sound, that can be our vocals, how long it takes for those vocals to get extinguished by the room. So we have something called RT60. That is how long it takes for the sound to decay 60 dBs. It's not technically decay RT60, but decay is usually used to express how long the reverb is going to take before you stop hearing it. And this pedal we have that parameter right here. Then we got, of course, the mix knob that allows us to have a dry signal if we have it all the way there, and a wet signal, so 100% effect. Then we have usually a tone parameter for before you go into the reverb. That is something that is great, because if you have a sound that has lots of low end, but you actually want the reverb only on the high end, you can actually take that low end out and give it some accentuation for the highs. And the same thing, you usually want a filter after the reverb, so you can take out the frequencies that you don't want and leave the ones that you do. So this one has this parameter here. Another very important parameter from a reverb is the pre-delay. So a pre-delay basically separates in time the dry signal from the wet signal, and that allows us to have a really big reverb on a vocal, for instance, and you can avoid getting a muddy sound because you can have the dry vocal and then some milliseconds afterwards the reverb starts. So you can gain lots of depth that way. So if you're going to be using a pedal as a reverb, it's really important to take into account something that is quite basic, that you have to ask the question, like, does my reverb have a mono input or a stereo input? Because if you want like a really lush and big reverb, you will want to have a stereo one. That's why usually the most common thing is to use plugins on your computer to generate that reverb, so you can have a really big sound. The cool thing about this pedal is that you have a stereo input, so you can plug it in with your guitar and have it in instrument mode. You can plug it in stereo and have it in line mode, and you can use it for mixing as like a plugin, or you can have it in Eurorack mode. And of course you have stereo outputs as well. And I also explained some nerdy details about this kind of pedals in the previous episode. So let's talk about 3 basic algorithms that you can usually find on a reverb. First of all, we got the plate reverbs. This is a reverb that was artificially generated with a block of metal, where you had a transducer acting as a speaker, injecting sound into this piece of metal, and then on the other side you got another transducer acting as a microphone, taking whatever was transformed by this piece of metal of the sound. So you get that kind of metal sound, lush with lots of harmonics, really nice reverb that is very common on vocals, for instance.
Angel came down from heaven yesterday. She stayed with me just long enough to rescue me. And she told me a story yesterday about a sweet love between the moon and the deep blue sea. And then she spread her wings right over me. She said she's gonna come back tomorrow. And I said, fly over my sweet angel. Fly on through the sky. Fly on my sweet angel. Tomorrow I'm gonna be by your side.
Then we got the spring reverb, that is another artificially created reverb, usually found on guitar amps, where you have a spring, where you got, again, two transducers, one acting as a speaker on one side and the other one acting as a microphone. And the one with the microphone is picking up everything that was transformed by this spring. The original ones are very hard to shape the decay of the sound. You can actually tighten or loosen up the spring to change the duration, but it's not very easy to do. And then we got the hall. So the whole reverb is like an emulation of a concert reverb. So you can get this big, lush, huge sounds that you get from a concert hall with quite a big pre-delay before it. But things can get muddy really quick with a whole reverb. But when you want something big, it's usually a very good choice. And it also has lots of content on the high frequencies. Now is where we stop with the basics and we go into some nerdy territory that I absolutely love. So this pedal is called AutoReverb because you have options right here in the front, and it comes with two modes, dynamic mode and pitch mode. Basically, it lets you configure some automation modes. So for instance, if you have it in dynamic mode, you can choose that when you're playing quiet, you won't have any reverb, but when you're playing loud, you get a whole bunch of reverb. The same thing you can do with the pitch. You can choose that from a certain note, you've got reverb on your keyboard, and below that note you have a dry sound. So basically you use the dynamics output, that is a CV output, and you plug it into any of these modes. So for instance, I've used my motor synth, also by Gamechanger Audio, that is a great synthesizer that instead of having normal oscillators, it has motors. What I've configured is that from this note on the keyboard onwards, we have reverb, and then below that we don't. And basically what I did was choose my note by pressing the pitch button and playing the note, and then I patched the pitch output into level input. So I have the level all the way down, and this little knob is like a little hand that each time I go up from that note, it will open up the reverb like this. It's an invisible hand. Then, for instance, something that I chose my Gretsch guitar with my Tone Master Pro, that is my pedalboard from Fender, and I plugged in that pedalboard into this reverb, and basically I switched to the dynamic mode, which you first have to calibrate how loud you're playing the guitar. So you just press here and strum, and then you got a threshold that you can move and choose from which point you want to have reverb. So you can see on the screen that there's a little light. So every time I play below that light, there's no reverb. Every time I go up, every time I exceed that light, I'll have some reverb. So let me show you how it sounds. So these demos, I recorded them yesterday, and today I woke up and I was like, how can I make this even more interesting? Like, how can I add, for instance, an LFO to this? And instead of having the mix controlled by my dynamics or pitch, how about I add an oscillator, a low frequency oscillator, to modulate and open up and close in a rhythmic way? So what I did was use my Korg MS-20 Mini that I have right here, and I'm not playing the keyboard, I'm actually playing synths through Pro Tools straight into this pedal, and I'm using the LFO out from the patch bay on the MS-20 Mini, and I plugged it into the level here. So that allowed me to have some rhythmic control on my reverb and getting some really cool sounds. I also used the sample and hold to have some random CV inputs for my tone and filter. So I tried it out with synths, and I also tried it out with my guitar. Now we have signal coming in from Pro Tools with a group of synthesizers. So I'm using the reverb for that, and I'm using the Korg MS-20 Mini to do the automation and the modulation on this pedal. So I'm not using the keyboard or the oscillators. I'm just using the LFO and changing the velocity to open and close the reverb so I can have some rhythmic effects. And I'm also using the sample and hold from the Korg to open and close the filters that this pedal has. So this sounds like this. So I picked up my Gretsch, my lovely Gretsch, and I plugged it into my Tone Master Pro down here. And what I'm doing is using the same setup I've used for the synths before. So I'm going from the Tone Master Pro straight into the auto pedal. And with the LFO and the sample and hold from the MS-20, I'm controlling how the reverb opens. So we've got like sounds like this. So did you like this episode? Let me know below in a comment. What would you like to see in the future, in future episodes? What other effects you want me to explain? I hope you enjoyed this. Of course, the most important thing for us is for you to leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't yet. I hope to see you in the next videos. I'll leave you on the screen the previous episode and the full playlist. My name is Louis Piluso, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.